1,740%. That is the percentage increase in internet searches for the word gaslighting in a single year. It's in your group chat, it's in political coverage, it's in your therapy sessions and the comment sections. Gaslighting is everywhere. And look, I'm aware that there's already a cottage industry of explainer videos that will tell you what gaslighting is, what it isn't, and how to spot it. That's not what we're doing here. A 1,740% increase doesn't happen by accident. There's a reason that this concept spread the way that it did and landed in the conversations of so many people talking about so many different things. That's what we're going to get into in part 1 on the sociology of gaslighting. Welcome to Soc Curious. I'm Dr. PK. I'm a professor and a social scientist who studies culture. So before we can ask why gaslighting has become so popular, we need a quick working definition of what it is. 30 seconds, tops, I promise. Merriam-Webster defines gaslighting as the psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, and typically leads to uncertainty of one's emotional or mental stability and increased dependency on the person doing it. A few things to notice here. First, gaslighting is not just lying. If I told you that last night I was at a nightclub, but really I was in my bed on my Steam Deck by 8 p.m., I'm lying to you. But if I convince you that you didn't actually see me online at 8 p.m. last night, and you're just the type of person who tends to imagine these kinds of things, that's gaslighting. Second, it happens over time. It's rarely something that gets accomplished in a single incident. Instead, there's a seed of doubt that gets planted and fostered over repeated interactions. And it should go without saying, but I'll say it, it's a pretty trash thing to do to somebody, even if it's unintentionally. At the same time, there's something worth flagging right up front that I think is unique about this concept. It's almost like there's something satisfying about using it. People don't just use the term gaslighting a lot. It seems like they're reaching for it. People are just itching to use it.
Now you are literally gaslighting.
I feel like I'm being gaslit. I'm being told that you say something.
You're using that because I used the term.
Oh, I came into this conversation expecting to use that term because I feel like you are constantly gaslighting me.
And I think that's because naming something is often the first step to making sense of it. In psychology, there's this idea of name it to tame it, where being able to really precisely identify and name a feeling, to put it into words, can itself make you feel more in control and regulated. And I think there's something analogous happening. When you can name a dynamic in your social environment, it demystifies it. It makes it feel more manageable, which is especially important when what's going on around you might be actively disorienting, as with gaslighting. Calling someone out for gaslighting probably feels good for a second reason. It's like an emperor has no clothes moment. You see through it and you're not fooled. If you can see the gaslighting, and if you can name it, that means it's not working on you. You're winning. And you have the clinical vocabulary to identify exactly what's happening. That's gotta feel good. As an added bonus, accusing someone of gaslighting you in an argument is probably a pretty effective way to distract from whatever it is you're actually fighting about, because now you're not arguing about the thing that's happened, you're arguing about whether the term applies. So as a term, gaslighting is useful. But here's the thing, the word is over 50 years old, but it's become popular only recently. How did gaslighting get popular? Well, to answer that question, we need to trace the journey it took from obscure psychological concept to lexical it girl of the summer. As I'm sure we've all heard, the term gaslighting originally comes from Patrick Hamilton's 1938 play Gaslight, after which came the 1944 movie adaptation, where a husband systematically manipulates his wife into believing she's losing her mind by partly dimming the gas lamps and then denying that it's happening. From those artistic roots, it entered the formal psychiatric literature in 1969 in an article written by Barton and Whitehead, which used the term to describe something very specific: people being put into mental institutions under false pretenses, often for someone's financial gain. But then, in the 1980s, the concept starts migrating into marriage and family therapy, and two things shift. First, it's understood as a dynamic that occurs within everyday interpersonal relationships, specifically intimate relationships. Second, there's no longer the assumption that the gaslighter is intentionally trying to gaslight their partner for some kind of gain. Instead, you could gaslight someone for reasons such as trying to meet an emotional need. And it was understood that this didn't have to be a conscious campaign for your behavior to have a gaslighting effect. No villainous mustache twisting required. That transformation of a concept has a specific name: concept creep. The term was coined by a psychologist named Haslam. and it refers to when psychological concepts gradually expand their boundaries so that the meanings of the term starts to apply to a wider and wider range of phenomena. Take bullying, for example. Originally, it described physical and verbal attacks between kids in a schoolyard. It has since been expanded to include adults, different types of actors in the workplace, a different setting. Haslam calls this horizontal expansion. Then there's a second direction, vertical expansion. That's when the threshold has changed to include experiences of different sort of degrees of severity, is the language he would use. Gaslighting as a concept expanded both ways. Horizontally, it expanded from the context of involuntary and inappropriate institutionalization to intimate partner relationships. Vertically, it moved from convince an entire medical system that a person was clinically insane to then describe a more quotidian and everyday efforts to make someone question their mental wellness. Concept creep explains how psychological concepts sort of expanded their meaning within the mental health field. But it still doesn't explain how gaslighting jumped from psychiatric or psychological practice into popular culture. And that's where the sociology of knowledge and ideas can lend us a hand. And yes, that's a real subfield, because sociology is cool. So, a paper by Hallett, Stapleton, and Sauter studied the careers, as they put it, of academic concepts, social science concepts that became popular over decades. They were things like Bowling Alone by Putnam, Arlie Hochschild's Second Shift. And what they found is that the journey from academic to popular use follows a rather predictable path. It typically starts with a trade book, meaning a book that's written by a psychiatrist or a psychologist or other expert, but for a general audience. The alternative would be to publish it in an academic press like Princeton University Press or Harvard Press, where the intent is really for those ideas to go back into academia and help practitioners there. A practical consequence of this is that you're going to have a smaller, more narrow and targeted audience. So, for instance, you may not even sell 500 copies of your book. And that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Every day's a gift. In the case of gaslighting, that book was Dr. Robin Stern's 2007 work, The Gaslight Effect. As another example of horizontal expansion, Stern used it to apply to any personal dynamic. This could be bosses and employees, parents and children. And she also used the metaphor of a tango to suggest that gaslighting wasn't just something done to somebody, but a two-way dynamic within a relationship. Notably, the book included a self-assessment survey, so readers could identify and evaluate the degree of gaslighting in their own relationships. Is perhaps the prototype for how we engage in spotting gaslighting as almost a recreational activity nowadays. While at first gaslighting entered the news because of reporting on the book itself, later reporters started to use the concept of gaslighting as a tool to make sense of the news. Not just reporting on the concept, but applying it. And it's that second move that matters a lot. The academic concepts that are most likely to become public ideas are precisely those that are flexible enough to be stretched and applied to a lot of different situations, while still retaining the core of their meaning. For instance, Putnam's Bowling Alone, that thing, I've seen it quoted in grade 10 textbooks, and someone just talked about it on Soft White Underbelly the other day, which is a very different context, Now, the worry is that as a concept gets applied to more and more situations, it loses its precision. What the sociology of ideas shows us is that that's not a bug, that's a feature of public ideas. And this brings me to what I think is the real value of a concept like gaslighting becoming popular. There's this term called sensitizing concepts. It's by Herbert Blumer, and it describes ideas and concepts that don't necessarily give you a precise answer or definition of what's going on, but it orients you to particular things in your environment. It gives you a sense of direction, even if not a map, Even if one were to pose the question, is what's happening to me gaslighting? And you're not sure, or the answer itself is no. That we can even ask that question itself is useful, because it gives you somewhere to start to make sense of what's happening. And here's where I ended up that I didn't expect when I started researching for this video. So some years ago, I was in a situation where things felt very off in a way that I really could not articulate. And as you can tell, I like to articulate things. I remember going out with a friend and trying to explain how my interactions with somebody were just so deeply confusing and troubling. And I couldn't even pinpoint any particular violation of manners or name calling, verbal abuse, or attacks on my character, but all I knew was that I felt absolutely awful after every single interaction, and it would last for a long time. And this was deeply unsettling for many reasons, but a few that I'll highlight. First, so my entire job and just my entire personality really is oriented to understanding social dynamics. Not being to name or understand or get some footing on what was happening to me was genuinely destabilizing. Like, the interactions were bad enough, but not being able to put my finger on what the heck was happening, because my body knew that it was bad, that it was wrong. The other thing was that I was my own bias about, or my own ignorance about who this type of thing happens to. Not in an entitlement way, but in a power way. I wasn't a young girl. I was an adult. I've held my own in some of the most demanding academic environments in the English-speaking world. I've moved to different countries by myself and managed things. I was extremely capable. I was able-bodied. I was making good money. And that because of this, all of these markers of success, that I was safe. By dint of luck and other social factors, I wasn't exposed to this type of behavior prior to meeting this person. I wish that I had the word gaslighting to draw upon at that time. I didn't even know that convincing someone to doubt themselves or misremember that they're misremembering things was even a thing that people did to one another. And in hindsight, I don't know that having the word would have necessarily fixed anything, but I do believe that it would have gone a very long way towards helping me articulate what was happening. To articulate it to myself so that I knew that I wasn't the problem. So I would have saved myself some time and money in trying to fix the problem as if it was a communication issue on my end. I would have been able to articulate it to other people, perhaps my therapist, and maybe get some kind of support and handhold on it. And maybe even like to friends who then would be able to perhaps share some of their experiences with this, because the popularity of the term suggests that we all probably have a few stories to share about gaslighting. And yes, absolutely, gaslighting as a term gets grossly misused. Yes, the edges of the concept have expanded and are blurry. And yes, it is extremely popular, which means it will sometimes come to be taken less seriously because it's taken the qualities of a meme more than a form of manipulation. But with all that being said, it doesn't mean that it's not happening to you. And that's the thing with popular culture, that once something enters popular culture, it tends to get trivialized. But that doesn't fly here at Social Curious, right? Two things can be true at the same time. It can be popular, and it can be profoundly sociological and devastating. Is that three things? You see what I'm saying? I've described how gaslighting became popular, but I've yet to answer the question, why now? That's what I want to explore with you next on the sociology of gaslighting. I hope to see you there, and even if not, stay safe, stay curious. Let's all take a breath.